sesión. Durante esta jornada, hemos estado entregando varios premios a figuras, a empresas, a personas que han hecho un esfuerzo especial en el Gobierno, seguridad, control de tecnologías de la información. En este caso, queremos otorgar un premio en auditoría. Este premio está patrocinado, hace entrega del mismo Telefónica, entrega a Carlos González, en representación de Telefónica, y es un premio al Supervisor de Protección de Datos Europeo. Lo representa en esta sesión Achim Klabunde, así que vamos, encantado de poder contar contigo. Muchas gracias.
Sí, muchas gracias. Está más fácil de hablar de esta posición que abajo.
Sí.
Ringrazio molto por la presentación del aborto. Evidentemente yo hablo mucho mejor el inglés que el español, es un grande honor que acepto en la plaza del supervisor, del señor Buttarelli, que ha hecho mucho per la capacidad técnica del EDPS. Okay, this is all my the Spanish part. Thank you very much, and I think it's an honor for the whole team of the EDPS and of course for the supervisors to be recognized for this part of their work. And I thank very much to the organizers of ISACA Valencia and to the donor of the prize. And I'll take it home to Brussels and it will get its place in the office of our boss. And yeah, thank you very much again.
Thanks to you also, and we are really happy to come with you here. Okay.
Now I'm going to take you through a presentation as you have seen in the program. Thank you again to the organizers for inviting me to this very interesting conference. As you know, my command of Spanish is slightly limited, but of course it's sufficient to read the program and to understand some of the discussions, and that is indeed quite interesting and close to the edge of technology. I'm also talking about a technical topic. As you know, we are working in data protection and privacy, so I'll be focusing more on privacy and in the specific context of the Internet of Things. So a short outline of my presentation. As everybody else, I have to introduce my organization, and then I'm going to the program, to the legal aspects, and to the challenge and what can be done. And maybe we can also invite ISACA and its members to participate. So the EDPS, the European Data Protection Supervisor, and I must admit I didn't check the Spanish version of the name, so Supervisor Europeo de la Protección de Datos, probably, is the EU-level equivalent to the data protection authorities that you have in the member states. Here in Spain, it's the AEPD, Agencia Española de Protección de Datos in Madrid, who's in charge of the private companies in Spain and of the public sector in Spain. So the Spanish state agencies and authorities at national level are certainly supervised by AEPD. And I know that there are some regional level authorities which probably are supervising the authorities at regional level. And there are also authorities and agencies processing personal data at EU level, like the European Commission, the Parliament, the Council, the EDPS, about 52 agencies, among others EUIPO in Alicante, just a couple of hours away from Valencia. And all these are processing personal data, but of course the EU institutions cannot be under the supervision of national authorities, because normally it's the other way around. And so we would also need a supervisory authority for data protection at EU level for the EU institutions. And that is the EDPS, and that's where we are working. So the first thing that we always have to keep in mind is what is actually personal data. And here we have an extract from the legal definition. Any information relating to an identified or identifiable natural person. These are four elements of the definition of personal data: the natural person, the relation to this natural person, and the fact that this natural person is identified or identifiable, and that it is any information. So one could talk about this subject the whole conference and a couple of weeks more, but I only give one example where the question, when is a person identifiable, was discussed at the highest court of the European Union, the Court of Justice of the EU in Luxembourg. Just last week, it was clarified that IP addresses, dynamic IP addresses with the timestamp as they are recorded in every web server's log, have to be considered personal data when it's possible to put them together with other data, which then leads to the identification of the person behind it. And as we all know, this is most often the case. And Spain has had its own cases with that. Is the famous Premusica case that was like 10 years ago about IP addresses collected by, I think it was Telefonica in that case, and demanded by a court in copyright-related cases. So there's been plenty of cases where this has been decided, and now the court has decided last week on a more general sense that IP addresses are to be considered personal data. But let's get back to the European Data Protection Supervisor. So here are the photos of the two men who actually have received the award that I was just taking on their behalf. That is Giovanni Buttarelli, the actual European Data Protection Supervisor, and the Deputy Supervisor, Wojciech Biborowski. And here is the team, and those of you who have good eyes and can look more closely will identify on this photo two persons which are in the room at this moment, one of which is from Valencia. But the time is limited, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Okay. The European Data Protection Supervisor gives advice to the European institutions. Well, actually, I was too fast. Because, oops, that was a bit extreme. Because there's not only the photo, there's also the text on the right-hand side. And so I mentioned that gives the functions and tasks of the EDPS. I already mentioned the supervision of the EU institutions. And also we give advice to the legislator of the EU, which is basically the European Parliament and the Council of the European Union, but it's also the Commission, because the Commission makes the legislative proposals. And one of the tasks is also that we look at technological development, and that is in particular the task of my team and me, to make sure that the EDPS also is at the edge of understanding what happens. And of course, quite importantly, we don't do this all by ourselves, but we work together with other data protection authorities. Examples where we, from our supervision work, is that, like many other organizations, also EU institutions use video cameras to survey the area for security reasons, and of course there are privacy issues with that, and so at least we have some information and some reasonable assessment on how much video surveillance is actually needed. Just to switch to the topic of data protection and technology. This is a slide which shows the development of data protection law in Europe opposed to some development in the IT and IT business world. So the first data protection law in the records was made in 1971 in one part of Germany. And at that time, we just had big data centers with mainframes and not very much portable computing. And then the laws developed also at international level, and this slide actually ends 20 years too early, of course, because it should go until 2016 when the new General Data Protection Regulation was adopted for Europe. But we have a few developments here, and we don't need to go in detail on this. Now I come to the problem when we talk about IoT and data protection and privacy. What's the problem? One thing that holds for the whole internet, and I don't think I need to introduce Bruce Schneier in this audience, what he said 2013 when internet engineers were critically looking at how the internet protocols and systems are working after it was revealed by Edward Snowden how many surveillance possibilities were used by US authorities. And he said it's the business model of the internet. It was never designed to support privacy, and it's technically not designed, and now the business is designed actually to use it for collecting personal data. Another way of looking at this is this graph, which is a Venn diagram. And I think as you all have a mathematical background, you know that a Venn diagram is showing two sets so that you can see where they intersect. The people who did this assessment were not too optimistic as concerns the intersection of privacy and the internet as such. And it has got a bit worse with respect to security. This was something that one could read very often on Twitter last week. The S in IoT is for security. So, and when you can spot the S in IoT, you can also see security in the IoT. There's a few more pictures which I would have liked to use, but I couldn't figure out the copyright, so I took away from it. There is a cartoon on the website, The Joy of Tech, about the ransomware Internet of Things, where you have a kitchen where each of the devices demands some bitcoins to be sent to their tuner so that they will function normally again, rather than working for those who have turned all these toasters and light bulbs and smoke detectors and fridges and doors and whatever you have into ransom devices so that they all do what is wrong. So I think so much has been written, said, and discussed here today on security and IoT that I can take it a bit more lightly and just mention it. But the serious point is when you don't even have security, when you don't have security, you don't even need to start looking at privacy, because when you know the designers haven't even spent a thought on security, which is protecting so many things and not only privacy and data protection, then they certainly have never spent a thought on privacy. And unfortunately, it looks very much as if this is true. Just to underline a bit the size of the thing, this is just one estimate, and there are others. Here they say we have 212 billion. These are US billions, 1,000 millions of connected devices, and many of these are called IoT devices in 2020. That would be 4 years from now. These estimates, of course, always are estimates, and probably next week you will find other estimates. But anyway, the growth is huge. As you see on the right-hand side, these are from two different sources. Cisco estimated that about 7 IoT devices per individual would exist, and the other one IDC thought that it would be more like 27 or 28 IoT devices per individual. I don't rule out any of these things. I find that even while I'm not very particularly engaged with having IoT devices around me, I have like 7 or 8 in my luggage when I'm traveling. So 6 is certainly a conservative estimate for the average person, and 28 could well be realistic. And if you multiply that with 6 billion individuals, then the figures appear quite realistic. So, and then please patch them all, because there has been a security flaw in one of the programs. So roll it out to 212 billion devices. Good luck. Here's just an example, and we had a discussion with one participant outside while we were waiting. This is, I don't know which, this is one of the health trackers, one Fitbit or whatever, Jawbone, or it's none of those, but one device that collects your pulse rate or the bearer's pulse rate and possibly other health data. And of course it's very helpful to have this kind of thing. I also use the step counters and other elements of my smartphone to see a bit, have an idea of where I am in exercising in 1 week or the other week, to follow up on this. So it can be very useful if you like to know that. I mean, some people are very keen on sharing this, so every day they post the number of steps and maximum health rate on the internet for everyone to see. Others are not so keen on making it known. But of course, and for many of these devices, the first party who learns about the health parameters is the manufacturer of the device, because the device, when it gets a connection, then it connects all the way through to the servers of the manufacturer, who then does the calculations and gives back the advice. And many of these devices don't even work when they cannot call home, because there's no other way to get the data back to you, to your smartphone app. The normal communication is it goes through your smartphone, goes to the server, gets processed there, and then your smartphone downloads from the server the data to really assess your own health. And here, everyone who uses it is still aware of the data collection, but of course there are plenty of other devices collecting data on individuals where it's not even so obvious and where we don't even know. Obviously not all of them wearable. The legal situation, I've only selected one article from the new instrument, the European General Data Protection Regulation, and that is the article on data protection by design and by default. It's not the full article, it's much longer, it's nearly a full page, but it says here that when devices are designed, then the controller, so the organization that wants to use it, has to make sure that they respect privacy and data protection principles. And outside the articles of the law, there is a recital which explains the intentions of the legislator. And there it says we can only create an obligation for the controller, so for the organizations that use the data and use the instruments, but we would like that the producers and manufacturers actually take these principles into account, so that we get the properly privacy-friendly devices on the market to start with. And that's, of course, a challenge, because there is very little incentive, and it's a difficult task. It makes devices more expensive, it increases the cost of production, of maintenance, may reduce some features, make less interesting. So it's by no means obvious. And that's what we have seen in the part that I call the challenge on what are data protection authorities trying to do. We are following the development together with our colleagues in the other European data protection authorities. That is the so-called Article 29 Working Party. It's called Article 29 Working Party because Article 29 of the current European Data Protection Directive establishes this as a body composed of all 28 member states' data protection authorities. And there was an opinion in 2013, there were more, but in 2013 there was an opinion on smart devices. In 2014 it was updated on more recent developments in the Internet of Things, including also some wearable devices. The EDPS, so the organization for which I'm working, issued an opinion in 2015 on particular on mobile health apps and devices. The expert who did most of the drafting and technical analysis happens to be in the room, and he speaks Spanish very well. Maybe you can show yourself, Fidel. Just a couple of weeks ago, or not less than a couple of weeks ago, we published an opinion on personal information management system, which is a very cautious and preliminary assessment, but there are ideas that personal information management systems could be the missing link between the device and the manufacturer by first collecting all the individual's data in such a personal information management storage, and then let the individual decide which data shall be given to who. So that's a technical challenge as well as an economic and legal challenge. And to go deeper into the matter, our colleagues from the Norwegian DPA have done an intense and detailed study on tracking in public spaces. So everybody knows that we are tracked when we are on the internet, but that we are even tracked by our smartphones and other devices when we walk through shopping malls and other places is not so much public knowledge. And the colleagues in Norway have done a study which has been published just a month ago on this matter. And just last week they did another one and looked at mobile health devices, in this case with a limited focus only on the privacy policies, and found not even the policies are good. So they are incomplete and unclear in terms and have provisions which would not be good. And of course, when not even the part that the lawyers do is done very well, then this isn't creating much confidence in the technical implementation. We looked at that, and that was also triggered in 2013 in the discussion, how does the internet function, why is this all going so wrong? And of course, in some cases, tracking and surveillance features are intentional, so they are actually what the business of the manufacturer wants. But in many cases, it's done without really wanting it. It's just because the process requires that new devices and new products are brought into the market very quickly. There is no time to test many features. And in the app market, we have agile technologies, we have Scrum, and we have also a business model which doesn't actually aim at doing a sustainable and highly developed device, but it's bringing something into the market very quickly, see whether it takes off, whether there's interest, and when it works well and takes off and people download this app, then sell the company and the ideas very quickly to one of the big venture capital collecting instances and let them deal with all legal and other problems. So that is, as I learned recently, very much the mindset of some startups who actually want only to go through this quick cycle and don't have the intention to develop a sustainable business themselves. And then, of course, every impediment that makes your process slower is not helpful. And if you can find people who download it without caring so much about the privacy features, bringing you a visible market share and a turnover level, which makes you interesting for venture capitalists, of course, that's a very reasonable business decision to go that way. And to, in particular, when you're working in an agile development where feature stability are created after the market has been hit and after the market is starting to respond by putting money into your company. But this point may never arrive. And the other challenge is purely technical, that things have to be developed quickly. They are not, everybody is doing it from scratch. Your work is done that has been done by others at other times, and not even if every level in itself is good, then putting them together in a new product can create new failures, and sometimes there are even failures in there. One colleague of mine who was working for us at the time reported on one case where a company found that in one of these security protocols there was so much complex exchanges before anything would happen, and so they looked at it and they didn't understand what these other steps were. So they thought, we can speed this up by leaving out this part of the protocol and just jumping from this exchange to the final one where we approve the connection. And then the devices they were connecting to were taken over by hackers, because these incomprehensible steps were just a security level against some man-in-the-middle attacks, and they had missed the point. And well, for commercial reasons, I've forgotten the name of the company involved, but it was a big one. So we try to work on the engineering side, and that's why we have set up what we call the Internet Privacy Engineering Network, where we work with people from other DPAs, from academia, from industry, and also from consumer and citizens groups to encourage first the application and development of privacy engineering principles and techniques, and to look at all the levels. So at the moment we are still in kind of awareness raising mode, so that we have events every year where we present where a few projects present themselves and get some feedback. We are successful in bringing data protection experts with non-technical background together with the technicians, which is always a very interesting and fruitful discussion, because it's really worlds apart meeting each other. But it's worth the effort, and it's also very important to have data protection authorities on board, because even the well-wishing researchers have, when they define a research project, they do that on the basis of the information that they have, and they look at the most interesting research problems, which are not always the most urgent problems in the real world. And through the data protection authorities, we get more feedback from the real world into the process, and that is also an additional field. Action points that we have in this notebook is the big developers cookbook. So in the vision of what we may have in 10 or 15 years or 10 or 15 months, it's really a book for developers where you can look, I have this environment and this privacy problem, so how can I fix this? Of course, we look for sources of funding for related project. I mentioned the bridging between lawyers and techies, and we are currently just setting up a resource list so that we make through our website a lot of the existing information accessible. And maybe something that someone may want to think about, we also encourage to set up groups on local level where we bring together the combination of people from different disciplines and different professional backgrounds to discuss how to implement privacy in the engineering process. Yeah, thank you very much. That is my last slide. As I had more questions than answers, I should maybe, instead of as usually putting, do you have any questions, I should have put there, do you have any answers? So if you have any answers, I'm happy to listen, but of course I would also answer questions. Thank you very much.